thanks everybody for joining. I'm Rebecca and I'm a sergeant at the Fawkner Police Station, and I'm working within the Fawkner Family Violence Investigation Unit at the moment. I've been asked to assist in and present a little PowerPoint in relation to family violence and clarify what actually is family violence and what police do in order to assist the victims in family violence. And after I do the presentation, then I'm more than happy to answer any and all questions that anyone might have. Please don't be shy. It's really important that, especially us as women, talk about this and talk about it with our girlfriends and our friends, and then men talk about it with their friends and family as well. It's really important that we all have healthy discussions in relation to this topic, which can sometimes be an uncomfortable one to have. So that's why we're specifically called it a conversation that we all have to have. Sarah, do you want me to go through the PowerPoint first?
Yeah, whatever you like, whatever.
No worries. Okay. I don't know how to maneuver the PowerPoint, so I might just say next when we go to the next one. How's that?
Yeah, no worries. So Jetta.
Okay, so I just wanted to outline right from the start that family violence is unacceptable in any form. And I'm not sure if everybody here knows what actually constitutes family violence, but it's not just what is typically thought of when we hear the word violence. We think of physical violence, so someone hitting, kicking, hurting somebody in a physical way. It actually encompasses a lot of different things. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So with police, what we do is we obviously are governed by the law, and the law in relation to family violence, we get that from the Family Violence Protection Act. And so this comes straight from the legislation that we're bound by. And so I'll go through a couple just so it makes you think about what actually constitutes family violence. So it can be physically or sexually abusive. So that involves obviously force, touching, hurting, the physical side of it, and also sexually abusive. So that can mean the actual act of sex and forcing that on somebody. And it can also be other forms of sexual abuse and making somebody uncomfortable with sexual connotation behind it. Then there's what's really important for people to understand is it can be emotional and physical abuse. Psychological abuse. So that means words, that means ongoing words, ongoing harm that's verbal in nature. It can be written, it can be text messages over and over and over, hounding somebody. It can be letters, it can be emails, it can be Facebook posts that demean people. So it's not something that's clearly defined, and it's quite broad in nature. But basically it means if it's hurting somebody, if it's causing real damage to that person, that is abuse, and that's not okay. Another important one is economically abusive. So that means money, finances, cash, assets, things like that. So often we have a misconception that if you're married, what's yours is his, what's his is hers, vice versa. What's hers is hers, what's his is his. And then quite often the dominant figure uses that to hold over somebody else. So they might say, well, if you do this, then you're not getting this. Or you can only have this amount of money in order to go shopping, and if you buy anything else, there's going to be trouble. That's financial abuse. That is not okay as well. Then there's also threatening. So threatening to do something. So if you go and see your friends, there's going to be trouble when you get home. You're going to, cop a beating. You're going to get this. You're going to get that. Threatening to do something, and then that person's in fear that that's actually going to happen.
And I just
sorry, yes.
With the threatening, I just want to highlight something that we bump into a lot. For using the religion and saying, if you don't do this, Allah is going to.
Yes.
So this is abuse as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Using something as leverage to get a behaviour out of their victim is a threat in nature. So definitely coercive is making someone do something or feel a certain way as well. And then any other way that controls or dominates the family member and causes that family to feel fear for the safety or well-being of that family member or another person. So that means if somebody's worried that their partner will take out their violence on perhaps the children, or they'll do something to their family members, for example, that can be what that relates to. And then also, big one is behaviour by a person that causes a child to hear or witness behaviour that I've just outlined. So this is really important. There's been lots of studies that have shown that the actual brain development of a child is very, very different to a child that isn't around family violence. You can actually see it in scans in children who have experienced family violence or witnessed it. So as much as it can be a physical thing, it's also very prevalent in the psychology and the mind of a child. And it's really important that we protect the children, because they're the next generation. What they see and what they witness and what they think is okay will then lead to their behaviours for the next generation. Okay, next slide, if that's all right. And so there's in this, I'm not going to go through it because I think this will be available on the Facebook page, but basically there's a lot of different things that constitute family violence, and this breaks down what it can be in terms of what family violence can also include. But there's a really important thing that I want to highlight, and it says, to remove doubt, it is declared that behaviour may constitute family violence even if the behaviour would not constitute a criminal offence. So you can be committing or be subject to family violence, and it's not necessarily an arrestable offence for a crime, and that includes behaviours, coercively controlling somebody. There's a lot of different things. So if somebody doesn't get arrested, or if somebody isn't held to account for their crime, so to speak, they can still be held to account under the Family Violence Protection Act. So it's really important to understand that. Okay, the next slide, please. It's really important to address that I'll be saying women a lot, women and children. And the reason that I say women and children is not because I'm a woman and so I feel I need to speak on behalf of all women. It's because the facts are there, and women are at a greater risk of family, domestic and sexual violence. As you can see, those facts that I've included on the left-hand side speak for themselves, and the figure is actually higher, that they're old figures. But women are predominantly the ones who are going to experience and be subject to serious sexual, physical and family violence by a current or a previous partner. With men, they're most likely to experience violence from strangers and in a public place, where women are most likely to know the perpetrator. And so it's really important that we just address right from the start that it is women, or it is women who are the ones who are going to be affected the most by family violence. Okay, next page, thanks. Okay, so this is a little bit more about the Act, and I've read this back and forth, but I find it really interesting that they actually outline and want to promote that family violence can affect the whole community. So if you have a look, CI, family violence affects the entire community, and it occurs in all areas of society, regardless of location, socioeconomic and health status, age, culture, gender, and so on and so forth, and religion. And it extends beyond physical and sexual violence and may involve emotional or psychological abuse and economic abuse. So it's saying that it doesn't just affect the person who's subject to family violence, it affects their families, it affects their children, it affects their friends, it affects everybody. And that's why it's really important that everybody talks about it, everybody understands what family violence is, and then further, they understand that they don't have to be in a situation where family violence is occurring. And that's where us as the police are here to help you, are here to intervene, are here to listen, and are here to make sure that the people who commit the crimes, who I'll refer to as respondents or perpetrators, that they're held to account. And hopefully, ideally, they learn that their behaviour is not okay, and they can recover, so to speak. Okay, the next slide, please. I saw this and I thought this is a really, really, really great, I suppose, slide to see. And it's just, I thought, let's get real is a really good heading for this, because at the end of the day, it's something that we don't want to talk about, and it's really difficult to acknowledge. But a woman is killed in Australia almost every week by a partner or former partner. And I'm sure anybody here who watches the news, say that we've almost become immune to what we see and what we hear and what we read, because it is so prevalent in our society today. And that's not something any of us should be okay with. It is devastating, not only for the woman who is killed, but their family, the children that they leave behind, their parents, their siblings, their friends. It affects everybody, and there's no reason why we should continue to allow this to occur. And that's why we need to educate people right from a very young age as to what behaviours are okay and what are not. And I think as a mum too, that really means starting with children from a young age and not condoning behaviour because they're a girl, because they're a boy. Boys will be boys. Oh, girls have to take it because that's what girls do. You're the woman in the relationship. It's your job to make the man happy. That's not behaviours that we should be okay with anymore. And so that's why identifying what is family violence and how we can stop it is really important. And you can see from those statistics down the bottom there that 77% of reported family violence victims and 89% of reported rape victims are women and girls. I don't know about you, but that was a pretty shocking statistic for me to read, and I'm not okay with that. Okay, the next page, please. So I'd just like everybody to read this, and especially I saw that there's a couple of males watching this as well. And I think sometimes some of these are things that we often think about, and especially the 64% believe violence is because men can't control their anger. I don't think we can accept that as a reason why violence occurs and why it's okay. There's a lot more in it, and I think this is interesting, these statistics. I'm not going to go on about it, but it's just something to really look at and think about and see if you've ever had any of these kind of preconceived idea or notions that think that that almost warrant why behaviour happens. Okay, next page, thank you. So I suppose when it says 1 in 6 women experience family violence, think about the friendship group that you've been around recently and looking around that friendship group or that family group that you've had. 1 in 6 of those women would have been exposed to family violence or is going through a term of family violence right now. So I think it's important to ask ourselves and to acknowledge what we can do in the situation to make sure that they feel like they are safe and they are supported. So here's some things to consider when a woman or a child discloses family violence. The first thing is offer them a safe space to talk in private. If they want to have somebody else present, then of course allow them to be present. But try and make it a private conversation. It's really important that you have that trust with somebody, and that's something that's really important with us as police. We want them to trust us and to know that we have their best interests at heart. So if you come to a police station, I'll talk about this a little bit further, but we're not going to expect you to say anything over the counter when you first come into the police station, other than to tell us your name and that you need to speak to us. And if it's family violence, we're trying to acknowledge that it might be something difficult that you can say straight up, and we'll take you into a room. If you're not comfortable speaking with a female or male that's at the counter, you can request somebody else. Don't be shy in that. This is your time and your space, and we're here for you. So please understand that we will do everything in order to make you feel safe. The next thing, which is important again for you and us, please, is to listen what, I'm going to say she a little bit in this because we've acknowledged that women are the main people who experience family violence. Listen to what she has to say and remind her that the violence is unacceptable and that she deserves to live free from violence. I think sometimes it's really hard to actually acknowledge that and come to that opinion until you actually hear it as a victim of family violence. You might be experiencing it and you might think that you're going through it, but then you're going to be thinking about reasons trying to justify the offender's actions. And, you know, perhaps it's because they love me so much that they don't want me to speak to anybody else, or I'm not good with money, so they have to take all of my money, or I'm the woman, my religion says this about women in a relationship and I have to go because I have to follow that path. But then when it's actually brought up that family violence is not okay and it's unacceptable, and it's actually spoken out loud and it's no longer a secret, that's a really, really important thing, to actually say it out loud. Okay, another thing is believe what they tell you. It takes, I think I've got a statistic that it's probably the 9th time that somebody has been subject to family violence before the victim will actually acknowledge it and actually speak about it, whether that's to police in a formal report or whether that's to somebody who they're disclosing family violence to. So please believe what they're saying, acknowledge it, and make sure that they're safe, and make sure that they have the ability to make their own decisions about what they're going to do from here on in. Another thing is to support and respect her choices. And this includes even if they are really, really sure that they're going to return to the situation, even though you know that it's not a healthy situation for them to be in. If it's dangerous and if it's expected that there's likely to be real danger to that person, and then it is on you, and it's really hard, but it's on you to encourage them to seek professional intervention in the form of police, and either get them to do it or do it yourself. We're not silly. We know that we can do as much as we can for somebody, and sometimes there's just nothing we can do to get them from staying away from the offender, the perpetrator, the respondent, even though we know that it's not in their best interests. What we have to do is support them and make sure that the risk to them is mitigated in every way possible. And that's also a job for friends and family too. And just reassuring them that it's not her fault. She doesn't deserve this treatment, and it's not God's will for her. So I think, Sarah, as you were saying about using religion, I think that needs to be explored a lot further, and I'm not an expert on it, and I won't go on about it. But I think I'm well aware that there's people in the community that use religion as a way to justify their actions, and I think something to twist it and turn it to suit somebody's cause for bad behaviour. All religion is about being good, respectful, and kind, and when that's not happening, then the basis of that religion is not being used and is meant for.
Yeah, inshallah, in the future we'll get someone from our community that you know what I mean, that can walk that very fine line of, do you know what I mean? But some things to look at is like if someone's going to sit there and tell you, I don't want you to see your friends, like as you said, like I love you so much, I'll just hang out with me, like and especially with reverts, like girls new to Islam, like we see it happen a lot. Abusers want to isolate you, like, because then you're not going to be able to it's harder for people to believe you, or to as you were saying, like, so these are massive red flags that you want to really, like, you just keep your social, even if you feel yourself falling so in love with someone, right? Just keep your social support system there. It's very, very important.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree anymore. All right, we'll go on to the next slide. So this is kind of what we were just speaking about. It was just a good slide for people to look at and to think about, the religion and the law and where it all fits in. Obviously, as police officers, we enact the law, but we're not. We are trained and we are educated on the difficulties in enforcing the law, and also explaining to somebody that their religion is one thing and the law is another thing, and we have to try and find a happy medium in order to ensure that somebody is not subject to family violence. And again, if somebody's thoughts, feelings in relation to a particular religion or a particular verse or something like that is not misconstrued into something that it wasn't meant for. Okay, the next page. So, Sarah, do you want to talk about this at all? Do you agree with what I've put in the slide? Sarah might not be there. So I was reading up a little bit.
Myself on you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was talking, and then you're like, oh, you're not there. So I was just thinking, like, all it's about the law of the land. Like, so I think people forget that when we're living in a land, so we're obviously in Australia. So even if, right, it doesn't, but even if Islam says you can do this and this to your wife or your husband. The laws of the land in Australia say this. So this is what we need to actually be going on. Anyway, so but Islam is a beautiful religion, and Islam does not, be careful of men that sit there spewing these verses to you, but not, not explain, different schools of thought are different. Do you know what I mean? Like be very careful of people that don't want you to speak to a sheikh yourself, or don't want you to get advice off someone else yourself, or if you want clarification on a certain verse, please get clarification. Like be very careful of men that don't let you get that clarification. It's drawn from the Quran. I do definitely agree with this. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never ever hit any of his wives, not ever.
I think it's really important. Oh, sorry, the lights just turned off in here. I think it's really important to know that, like, if something's causing harm to you, then it's not okay. And that's as simple as it gets. If something is hurting you, causing harm to you, then there's no justification for any type of behaviour that's doing that.
Yeah, and this comes down to even, so reverts are very raised, a lot of Muslim sisters are so happy to stay at home, for example. They love staying at home with their family. They love this, right? But then some reverts, or just even born Muslims in general, they might not, their personality might be a bit different. So to keep them at home and to force them to stay home, this does cause harm, this does cause, it is harmful. So, it's again comes down to, like, if you're going to get married, don't settle for someone that's not on the same level as you in regards to things like this, because you can't change people. And, harm later, it's going to, trust me, just be patient, wait for someone that fits your, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we'll go to the next page. Do I have a bit of time, Sarah? Do you need me to hurry it up, or this?
No, you're right.
Okay, awesome. All right, so the next page is specifically about Victoria Police and what we do. So if anybody is experiencing it, has experienced it, or is worried for somebody, then this is really important for you to know. So if a report is made either via 000 or somebody has reported it, say a neighbour or a friend or a family member, or you've come to the police station, what we do is it's all about risks for us and risks to the victim, and how we're going to manage that risk. We don't want anybody to end up being another statistic. At the end of the day, that is the most important thing for us. So we will make an assessment, and we will look at intelligence, being past family violence history, criminal history, risk factors such as homelessness, say if they're new to the country, for example, if they're pregnant, drug use. There's all certain types of risks that we know make things higher or lower on that scale, and we take into account what's happened. So you'll be asked a series of questions when we attend, and that really assists us to assess the risk. Some of the questions that you might be asked from us can be uncomfortable, but they're there for a reason, and they're there because research has shown us that we need to ask those questions in order to make the best assessment. Please don't worry if the offender, the perpetrator, if they're the ones who called 000. So if they call us and they say, my wife is crazy, she's just thrown the pot of boiling water that she was making dinner with across the room, she's flipping out and I need help, she's insane, and you've heard that, but you know that the background to that is that he's been beating you, or he's been psychologically abusing you for a period of time. You're at your wit's end. You're a mother. You're dealing with children. You're exhausted, and you've been subjected to this for a long time. And on this occasion, it's just been basically the end of a big incident. We're not going to come to that situation, and we're not going to necessarily hold you to account for your actions on that day. If you've done something extensive and it's criminal, we might have to speak to you about that. But we understand that the vast majority of times that things like that happen, there's been a catalyst for that to occur. And so that's when we come in and we speak to you. We take you apart from the person who's alleged to have committed that act of violence against you. We try and get as much information out of you as possible. And it's really, really important. It's a really difficult conversation, but we want to know everything so we can help you as much as we possibly can. We do not want to be coming back there and seeing somebody who is a shell of themselves or seriously harmed, or their children are seriously harmed. We want to make sure that the first time that we come is hopefully the last time that we come. That doesn't always happen, but that is what our best intentions want for us. Okay, yep, next page, please. Okay, so we're also governed by what's called a code of practice. So there's a lot of background stuff that goes into teaching us about family violence as police officers. It's not something that can be easily taught. We are educated about it right back from when we first start at the academy, when we're on the job, and also once we're confirmed as members, and it's pretty much ongoing for the rest of our career. Part of the code of practice and with the Family Violence Protection Act tells us that we as police officers are able to intervene, and that's via a few things. And I'm not going to go on about this too much because you can read about it, but there's a few things that we can do. So we can issue a family violence safety notice. So everybody usually knows about intervention orders, and they hear DVOs or IVOs or AVOs. It's all the same thing, really. A safety notice is similar to that. There's slight differences. It's to do with the court process and how long they're good for and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's something that is given to the perpetrator and also given to the victim, and it tells them what they can and can't do. Things include not committing family violence. I think I might have that on the next slide. So actually, I'll stop about that and we'll go to the next slide. Safety notice. Yep, so that's what I've gone about. So this page you can read once it's available online, but it basically just talks about a family violence safety notice. So it's a notice that's provided to somebody. It has a court date you need to go to court, and that's done in conjunction with any criminal offences that might have been identified. So family violence safety notice and intervention orders are what's called a civil application. So somebody can have a family violence safety notice or an intervention order, and that won't show up, say, on their criminal record. A lot of people are worried about that. That doesn't show up on their criminal record. However, that's when, like, there might be, for example, coercive control or emotional abuse, and we take out something to curb that behaviour and just tell the respondent that behaviour is not okay. However, if there's some criminal offences noted, such as an assault, a serious assault, an injury, stalking, using your phone to harass somebody, then that's a criminal side of it, and that's stuff that goes before the criminal court. And that, if you are convicted, can go on a criminal record. So it's two separate parts. One is a civil process, one is a criminal process. We help with both. Okay, the next page, please. Okay, this is about leaving the family home. A lot of people are worried about this. But we often hear victims when we're attending an address, they don't want the respondent to leave the family home, or alternatively, they want them out of there. They're in fear. They've had enough. It is a volatile situation. We have the ability to exclude or to keep somebody at the family home, depending on the risk. You'll hear about me talking about the risk a lot. That is something that's up to us. Now, we might put the paperwork together and say, no, we're worried about the risk of the person, or we think that they need some time to separate. We're going to include the clause that allows them to leave that family home. However, people think that that's a definitive and forever date. It isn't necessarily. So if there's been a minor to medium risk type of incident, it might just be until the next court hearing, which is usually 2, 3, 4 days, the like, of what might occur before the court. And then on that date, you're able to go there and you're able to say, I want this to happen. I want the family unit to be together for the sake of me, my family. I think this has been a shock for us, and we're going to try really hard to work together as a family and engage with the services that have been offered to us. However, if it's a serious incident, and somebody wants the respondent back at the home, we might argue for the fact that, no, that's not okay. And that's purely for your protection. It's not because we're police and we want to exert our authority. It is because we know what happens, we've seen it, and we're not going to let that happen to you as best as we can. Okay, anything, next page.
It's do you know, have you heard of something called like the trauma bond?
And what's it in terms of them wanting
the person to stay at the home? They get, we see it, it's worse than drugs. We see people literally addicted to the toxicity, you know, and to, you know, have a break from that. It's the same as withdrawing from drugs, you know. It's really, it's full on. But, you know, as you said, you guys have seen this over and over, you know, and you know, thank you so much, you know, for putting these things, even though people might not like it at the time. You guys are in a position to see a little bit better, you know what I mean? So
absolutely. I suppose when you're in it, it almost feels normal, and then it comes with a whole bunch of other things, psychological aspects that come into account. The shame that you think you've brought onto yourself, that you can't have that functioning family that you've had. You know, oh, my child needs a man and a woman, or, you know, the two partners to be a proper functioning family, or I'm going to damage my child, or I can live with this. I can't let my parents see that I'm separated from my husband or my partner. And so all these things are taken into account. And, you know, oh, if he leaves, then I'm not going to be able to afford the rent or the mortgage, or I can't afford to send my child to school, so I might as well just stay in there. It's all these things that we see, and people don't realise that there actually is an out in services. I'm not going to sit here and profess to say that we have the answers for everything. We don't, but we try our absolute best to help. And there's so many services that are available to women now, and they're at the back of the screen. And more online. You know, the internet is a great source of information, but it is really, really hard to actually acknowledge that you're going to be okay when you're actually in it. It often takes victims, you know, a period of 3, 4, 5, sometimes a year before they actually can reflect and go, thank God I'm not in that anymore. It was really hard and I shouldn't have been subject to that. And they often blame themselves for staying in it for so long. But you don't realise that you're in it when you're in it, and that's the important thing. That's why these conversations are really important to have, because, you know, hopefully, or not hopefully, but if there was somebody who's listening to this who's experiencing something like this, they might not have realised it until the words were read on the page, or you've listened to me and you can understand that, you know, it's something that's not okay, and we're here to help. I've just put a little blurb here about standard conditions that are often on safety notices or intervention orders. These options that are on here are available to us as police to put intervention orders and conditions for the respondent to have to abide by. Now, again, this is the civil side of things, but if they breach this order, so, for example, if one of the orders were being within 5 metres of the protected person, and they come within that 5 metres after they were served with this paperwork, then that becomes a criminal offence, and they're pursued via the criminal stream for that. Depending on the situation, breaching one of these can result in somebody being interviewed and let go. Somebody can be interviewed and bailed, so they're actually on further paperwork which says if you breach this, then you're going to have to go before a court to explain why you're not going to jail on this occasion, and that's called a remand. And then some respondents are actually, as soon as there's a breach of this, they're actually remanded in the first instance. That's another conversation for another day. But what I'm trying to say is that one size doesn't fit all, but we will do our best to identify, again, the risk to both the victim and them being subject to it, and also the risk of the respondent from reoffending, depending on their behaviours and history and things like that. And then we will assess whether or not we're going to summons them for an offence that we've, you know, identified has occurred, whether they're going to be bailed or whether they're going to be remanded. Okay, next slide, thank you. So this is about intervention orders. So this is the IVO, AVO, DVO. It's all the same thing. An intervention order can be enforced anywhere in Australia, and if a domestic violence order, so DVO, is issued in another state, it will apply and be enforced in Australia. So if you fled from, say, Sydney, for example, come here and then they're still offending, whether they're offending, they're doing it online, or they're getting one of their relatives here to offend, we can intervene in that and we can stop them from doing that. So it's really important to know, just because they might say, well, you've gone interstate, so nothing's going to happen to me and I'm going to make your life hell. That's not the way it works. Okay, and the next slide. And the next slide, I think we've gone through that enough. This is really, I thought, was a really beautiful image that I found. It was on an article via the ABC, and yeah, it's just basically showing that men have an important role in taking a stand against family violence too, and it's really important for them to treat women with respect, with love, with care, and talk to other men about what's going on in their lives. And if you as men identify that a friend or family's behaviour is not okay and it should not be occurring, stand up, talk about it. Don't sit there and say nothing, because you're not assisting if you do that. You're not holding another man to account is a really powerful tool as a man. So I would encourage you to really have those courageous conversations. Okay, and then the next couple of slides, I'm almost done. You're probably sick of hearing my voice now. The next couple of slides are some resources that are available to us and to you. There are so many resources that are available out there now. So on this slide is kind of generic. Safe Steps as Family is fantastic, and that's something that's available 24 hours for women and children. There's also men's referral services. So perhaps if you're a man watching and you think, you know what, I think my behaviour needs a little bit of help, there's a support service on there. I suppose I haven't touched on this much and I've outlined why, but yes, men can be victims of family violence. We will support you exactly the same way that we support the women. We are able to identify when actions are occurring and it's against a male from a female, and we will intervene the exact same way. There is no difference. If family violence is occurring, doesn't matter of race, sex, ethnicity, age, we will do exactly the same, and that is stop it occurring. Okay, and the next page. The next page I found there's a couple specific to the COLD community, so the Muslim community as well. So that Muslim Women's Centre was a really great resource for a whole bunch of things, not just family violence. So I'd encourage you to look at that and familiarise yourself with some of the stuff that's on there. It was really, really good. And then there's a multicultural centre, which is a health organisation, and that as you can see what it does. So they're two kind of specific to the target audience today that I found that I thought might be useful to you all. I'm more than happy to accept any questions or chat about anything that anyone wants to.
We do have a question actually that's just come through. So do respondents in family violence situations, FNSN, I'm not sure, what does that stand for? Family violence?
Yeah, family violence safety notice, yep.
Sorry about that. Stop providing for their household. For example, the husband was the abuser but also controlled the financial side of the family. Would the wife/family then have to support themselves? I'm just going to jump in quickly there and say this is what, we can refer you to places like Zakat Foundation, like Girls Don't Ever Feel That You'll Ever Be Stuck With All the Rent, or, this is exactly what Zakat Foundation is there for. So I'll hand it back over to Rebecca and she'll finish answering that question.
Sure. So I suppose I've already spoken a little bit about financial abuse, but if they are doing that in order to control what's then occurring, we can look at that as financial abuse. Now, it's really, really broad as to what they do. We would encourage you to speak to us beforehand and speak to services beforehand if you think that the situation in your relationship is perhaps becoming a violent situation or a family violence situation. So then you can put strategies in place before perhaps the demise of a relationship occurs. However, if it does occur, there are so many services out there that can help. And in terms of rent and mortgages and stuff, there's There's things with the rental system that allows for family violence victims to have leeway in relation to payments and rent and the like. And there's the same with mortgages. So the banks are well aware that offenders often use mortgage repayments and loans and things like that to control their victim. And so there's lots of things in place that the bank will allow you to do, suspend the payments and stuff like that. In relation to children's schooling, that's the education department are fantastic for children of family violence. In relation to food, there's so many services out there, community groups that assist people who find themselves going without, so that they're not. So it's really, really good. And obviously we're able to refer you to a whole bunch of those services, and there's lots out there. We will try our best. You might not be able to go out and buy the fancy clothes for a while and you know, and the like, but the bare basics, we will try our hardest to get you everything that you could possibly need to have some type of normalcy while you're going through a really difficult period.
So another question was, how prevalent is family violence in the Muslim community? What do you see as the biggest barriers to reporting within the Muslim community, and how can the Muslim community assist and overcome these barriers?
That's a really great question. I'm just going to scroll up so I can see it all. I love this. That's a really, really good question. Let me just open it. Okay, so in terms of prevalence, I don't have statistics, so I'm not going to provide anything. All I can say from my own personal experiences, I've been out in the Hume area and now the Moreland area for I think maybe almost 8 or 9 years now, and I can say that I've dealt with a lot of persons from a Muslim background and a Muslim community, and it doesn't just affect Muslims, it affects everybody. But it is difficult with the Muslim community because I think that, like, you're very family oriented and you're very respectful of your elders and your positions, and that can often cause difficulty as well, because you think that what was okay for your parents, for example, is okay and acceptable now. And we see that I'm from a Greek and Italian background, and it's the same with my background as well. It's really difficult to educate people on what previously was okay is not seen as okay now. So I think it's definitely out there. It would be silly to not acknowledge that it is in the Muslim community, but it's I'm not sure about the statistics as to where it is higher or lower compared to other communities. The biggest barriers to reporting within the Muslim community, I think understanding the way in which to report it and what constitutes as family violence. I don't think it's as an open conversation with the Muslim community as it perhaps is with other communities. And so that's why these conversations are so important. And I'm so glad to be part of it, because I think education is the key. And that involves family, friends, places of worship and the like. We need to start really talking about it from the way of the land, as opposed to what the religion says and how it's interpreted, because a lot of the times the way that it was interpreted is not the way that it was intended, but because it's been interpreted to be that for such a long time, it's seen to be that, and that's it. How can the Muslim community assist and overcome these barriers? Stuff like this is number one. Like, I think just talking about it, there's a lot of work that goes into working with imams, with places of worship, with trying to speak to women and men. And I think really as women and for whoever is a mother out there, speak to your children. Speak to your children, speak to your children, because you are going to be what allows the next generation to be seen as the right and proper behaviour. And really these conversations and educating ourselves will then lead on to educating the children of the future. Yeah.
So there's another question about, for those with the family violence, safety, what was the end point?
Safety notice.
That's it, sorry. Or a FBIO. It's all changed in the past few years, right?
I know, it's so hard to keep
IVO.
You can just say, you know, if you say safety notice or IVO or AVO, I know what you're talking about.
Now I get it. So confused for a second. So if for those with them as a victim, would these orders still protect the victims from the perpetrators if they are threatened to not report any breaches of these orders, and how effective are these? So if someone's been threatened, and then they're being threatened, like if you report that I've tried to contact you, this sort of.
Yeah. So would these orders still protect the victims from if they're threatened to not report any breaches of these orders? I would say report any type of breaches that are occurring. If they are threatening you and you have the protection of an intervention order, and they're breaching that, and we will hold them to account. We will bail them with strict conditions, or we will remand them, and we'll remand them for a period of time, and then we'll keep check on them once they're released. The orders are very effective. It's often a really big reality check for somebody to be brought to a police station, to be processed, to have to go to court. I mean, all of these things are time consuming. It's embarrassing as well. It's embarrassing for the offenders to have to be before a magistrate and have to justify why their freedom is now different to what they experienced before because of their behaviour. There's also referral agencies that speak to them. There's also referral agencies that speak to women. If there's a serious threat to somebody's safety, we have other options such as safe accommodation. We would suggest that they can also stay with family members or friends where the offender might not know where they reside for a period of time. A lot of these things tend to get better with time once somebody has a bit of a reality check. And sometimes the offender's behaviour is not going to change. And so that's when there's different levels of intervention that we as police engage in, and also the services that are available vary. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the first time that police attend is the last time that police are going to attend because they've learned their lesson, so to speak, and they've curbed their behaviour. And other times we can be involved on multiple occasions, and there's a whole bunch of reasons as to why that is. And again, it's just about mitigating that risk.
Okay, so I think there's one more. If the perpetrator has freedom after some time in prison for family violence, can the IVO stay in place upon release from prison?
Absolutely. So this is something they don't, just because they come out of prison doesn't mean the IVO isn't in place. So some IVOs last for a year, some last for 2, some last for 5, some last for 60, some are indefinite. It varies depending on the level of fear and the level of seriousness of the offending. If an intervention order is due to expire in a couple of months, and you've heard that once that intervention order expires, that person is going to try and contact you and re-offend or something similar to that, it can be extended as well. Similarly, and it's really important to note that sometimes, our intervention does work, and what's in place now might not be relevant in 6 months' time when you're really trying to make that family unit work. You've had lots of active intervention from services, from families, from police, and you think, you know what, I really want to try and have this family unit happening. The order can be revoked or be amended so that the bare basics are in place, such as just do not commit family violence. So if they do commit family violence, we have a backup to deal with them. But in terms of, keeping their distance and stuff like that, that can be taken out. So yeah, it's not, like I said, not one size fits all. Okay.
So there's another question about how do you decide what is coercion and what is not?
That's a good question. I probably don't have the best answer for that. It is not defined. It is not defined as to what actually can constitute coercion or not. It's like a series of behaviours. It's verbal, it's physical, it's psychological, and that's when we dissect statements, we dissect evidence, and we get experts, being our prosecutors, or case law, which is what we rely on a lot for what defines what coercive control is. And yeah, so it's really a case-by-case basis. It takes into account the victim and their vulnerability, what might be okay, what might be something not defined as coercive control for, say, a person of a mentally sound mind might be different for somebody who is impaired by something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good explanation, actually.
Yeah.
So someone else is asking, what is the privacy rules? For example, can we find out where the perpetrator is so that if we do our best to stay away from that area, and find out if they have freedom or prison? So did you get that? Like, they're basically saying, so if someone's come out of prison or someone they're trying to stay away from that person, but how are they going to stay away if they don't know where that person is, you know? But then there's a fine line, isn't it? Because they might still be, you know.
So in terms of where they're residing and stuff like that, we can't actively divulge that information. It all comes down to privacy. It's the same thing with like sex offenders. When they come out, we can't say if you're living next to a sex offender, we can't divulge that they are who they are, because they've effectively served their term of imprisonment, and they've served what they are to serve, and so now they're back in our society, and they're hopefully trying to rehabilitate or have been rehabilitated. In terms of whether or not they have freedom or in prison, yes, so there's a thing called the Victims Charter, and that's really important, that the victims of family violence and of other violence, there's certain things that we are allowed to disclose to victims to ensure that they, I suppose, can feel more comfortable in their everyday to-day life. And one of those is whether or not someone's incarcerated or not. So we can give that information to you.
Okay, so someone sent a question via text. So is there a Muslim representative in VicPol for the Muslim victims to go to?
Yes, there are. So we have CULT, so cultural and linguistically diverse. I always get a tongue tie with that. Members of our community, and we have certain, I suppose, leaders in that community. That, you know, if in terms of with language and with culture and with religion, you know, some people might feel more comfortable dealing with somebody who is on their level with whatever way. But realistically, I would like to think that all of us, all members of Victoria Police, are capable of forming a healthy relationship with a victim of family violence. And I would ask that anyone watching this has an open mind to that, because I would certainly, my wish would be that any person of any background, faith, age, sex is comfortable speaking to me, and I would encourage that you have a little bit of trust in us, because we understand that, yeah, it's a sensitive nature, but we're all able to assist you in any which way possible, regardless of our own personal backgrounds and faiths and things like that. We do have lots of services such as translation services, support services to accommodate for people who English isn't their first language, and we engage with those anytime to make sure that you're fully aware of everything that's happening. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. So I think that's about it for now, actually. I'd like to do something like this in future again about child abuse, actually, because it's all about the cycle, isn't it? Like the cycle, we want to break that cycle.
Absolutely. It's really, really important that we do that. And so it's just, I think the more that we talk about it, the more that we address it, and the more that people are aware of what is out there. And please, don't be scared to call up and just ask for advice. I mean, even if it's at the start of something that you think, you said the word red flags, and we talk about that a lot too. We see the red flags, we read the statements, and you know, we see all these things, and it's the time that they come to us is not the first time that it happens. So if you're ever in that situation, you think, you know what, I think I'm going through something, I'd like to get some advice, call your police station, come in, have those conversations. We're not here to make everyone's life difficult, and at the first sign of something going wrong in a family household, we're going to do something and intervene. That's not, if we can help before that, that's even better for us. So, yeah.
Awesome. So it was so nice to meet you, and I'm really happy with the amount of people that were able to join us on Zoom, and I'm so sorry about, you know, the Facebook thing, but inshallah we'll get the video up there soon. So, and everyone please share it around. You never know who might be going through something at home, you know. Sometimes it's obvious and sometimes it's not. But some things I guess to look out for would be like, you know, it's like say if a friend messages you or something even and says, oh, you know, do you know any good like Muslim counselors for marriage or something? But then 5 minutes later she messages and says, please ignore that message and do not reply. Like this is a massive red flag, and I've seen it a few times, because obviously their husband or whoever is looking at their phone. So, and that's another thing. Can you touch on, you know, your phone's your private thing, isn't it? So, you know, this is another red flag, isn't it? There's red flags everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So it was really nice to meet you. Oh, hang on. Is there any more questions before we go? Okay. Thanks. So everyone's just basically saying, yeah, thanks to everyone for joining. Very informative. One sister saying, so, okay, so this is important. I didn't find out until I was a victim that the perpetrator had 27 other family violence history charges. What could I have done differently?
So you haven't done anything wrong to start off with. Let me just address that straight away. Unfortunately, perpetrators of family violence ongoing choose their victims because they're caring in nature and trusting and see the best in people. So I dare say that you're a lovely person, and that's probably why you became a victim of family violence. And congratulations that it appears that you've been able to get out of that relationship. That's a really brave move. I don't think you could have done anything differently. Unfortunately, the laws are the laws and privacy is privacy, and sometimes we just come across people and we don't know what they were like previously, and they probably seem like the absolute best people in the world when you start. And then once they've built your trust and built that rapport with you, then things change. I think the best thing is to, I suppose, once you get that feeling in your gut and you think, whoa, something's not right, trust it and trust yourself, and understand that you can leave an unhealthy relationship at any time. There's really nothing that you could have done differently. And it's, yeah, I wish I had a magic wand and show you the previous history, and I wish that was available to all of us. It isn't. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't really have any more of an explanation than I think just congratulations for you being able to identify that and getting out of there. And, yeah.
I guess something that is encouraged in the Muslim community is to ask around about people. But people forget to do this because they're falling in love.
Yeah, and it's very powerful and it's lovely. And, you know, when you start a relationship, everyone starts a relationship with the best intentions, but you do not have to stay in something that is unhealthy for you or unhealthy for your children or your family unit. You do not, and that's, I suppose, what I want to say. Like, you do not have to stay in something that does not make you happy anymore. It is okay to seek help and to speak to your friends and family when it is not healthy for you anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute honour having you here with us, and inshallah to meet you again in the future, maybe to talk about the child abuse. You know, that would be awesome. And I encourage everyone that Faulkner family violence are very, very good. Like, so, you know, definitely get hold of them. Keep your social support, girls. Like, you know, this is a big thing. You know, big thing. All right, assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.